Hi, Studio Recapped here. Today, we're going to talk about a movie called Law-Abiding Citizen in the thriller and crime genres. Spoiler alert is on, watch out and take care. You won't believe how much your support means. Thank you so much for your support. The movie starts with a man named Clyde, spending time with his wife and daughter. Clyde's daughter makes him a bracelet and gives it to him. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. As soon as Clyde opens the door, two burglars force their way in and throw him to the ground. One of them, named Darby, tells Clyde, "You can't fight fate," and then stabs him. Darby's partner, Rupert, wants to leave, but Darby doesn't stop there. He also stabs Clyde's wife and right in front of Clyde's eyes, assaults her. At that moment, their daughter appears. Darby doesn't spare her either and kills her. Meanwhile, we see a skilled prosecutor named Nick discussing Clyde's case with his colleague. The judge rules that the DNA evidence from the crime scene is inadmissible. Instead of fighting the case, Nick makes a deal with the murderer. Nick meets Clyde and tells him that Darby testified against his partner, blaming him for the murders. This way, Darby would only get 5 years in prison. Clyde begs Nick not to make a deal with the murderer. But Nick believes that it doesn't matter what Clyde knows, what matters to the law is proving it. In court, the case is presented as if Rupert was the main killer and Darby was just an accomplice. Nick gives a statement to the press about the ruling. Darby sarcastically thanks him for ensuring justice is served. We see Clyde watching from a distance, witnessing this injustice. After a long day, Nick goes home. He talks to his wife, Kelly, and their unborn daughter. We then jump 10 years into the future. Nick's daughter is now 10, but he's still deeply absorbed in his work and barely spends time with her. He's so busy that he doesn't even attend her school performance. Kelly is frustrated that Nick is missing out on their daughter's life because of his job. Finally, the day of Rupert's execution arrives. Nick and his colleague, Sarah, attend the event. Instead of being at his daughter's recital, he's watching an execution. Rupert's last words are that he wasn't the killer and that he's being executed for a crime he didn't commit. The execution follows a specific sequence of 3 lethal injections. In theory, he should have died painlessly, but suddenly, Rupert starts convulsing, screaming, and suffering horribly before dying. This had never happened before. The excruciating execution makes headlines, but the warden explains that their job isn't to make criminals suffer. A police officer hands Nick a bottle with a note attached. "You can't fight fate." Nick immediately recognizes the phrase from Darby's case. He tracks down Darby's location and heads toward him. Meanwhile, Darby is getting high when he receives a phone call. A mysterious man warns him, "The cops are on their way. If they find you like this, you're going back to prison." Darby is stunned. He looks up the window and sees police officers surrounding his place. Panicked, he starts shooting at them. The same mysterious man calls him again and says, "If you don't want to go back to prison, drop the gun and head to the abandoned factory." Darby does exactly as instructed. On his way, he finds a cop asleep in his patrol car. He gets in, grabs the officer's gun, and forces him to drive. They stop in an isolated spot. Darby pulls the cop out, makes him kneel, and just as he's about to shoot him, he gets another call. He realizes that the mysterious savior on the phone is none other than Clyde. Darby tries to shoot Clyde, but the gun was rigged. It injects a paralyzing serum into his hand. Now he is completely immobile but fully conscious. Clyde takes him to his warehouse and tells him, "You're about to feel a pain no one has ever felt before." Before torturing Darby, Clyde tells him that he knows what it feels like to be helpless, just like he was 10 years ago. Darby tries to cover his face as Clyde turns on camera and starts cutting him into pieces. He does it so brutally, with such precision, that it's as if he's been a professional killer for years. Meanwhile, Nick and Sarah discuss Rupert's agonizing execution. Nick suspects that Darby had nothing to do with it. He wasn't smart enough to pull off something like that. Later, the police find Darby's body cut into 25 pieces. They inform Nick about the gruesome discovery. Police realize that Clyde is the only one with a motive. Over the years, he had sold all his possessions and bought properties in unusual locations. Even the warehouse where Darby's body was found belonged to him. The police head to Clyde's house, but instead of panicking when he hears the sirens, Clyde calmly removes his clothes, completely unfazed. The police surround his house and arrest him. As they take him away, Clyde shares a meaningful look with Nick. At Clyde's house, they find law books and torn newspaper showing Nick and Darby shaking hands. Later, Clyde is taken to the interrogation room. The police have no evidence against him and are just hoping for a confession. Meanwhile, Nick's daughter receives a DVD. She thinks it's a video from her school play and is about to play it. Her mom tells her to wait for her dad, but she can't resist and starts watching it. The DVD turns out to be footage of Darby's brutal slaughter, sent by Clyde. Nick's family is terrified. Nick talks to Clyde. He first turns off the recording device and then praises Clyde for killing a scumbag like Darby. Clyde says he always wanted to kill Darby and had imagined it countless times. Nick assumes this is a confession and starts to leave. but Clyde stops him. He carefully repeats his words, making it clear that he never directly admitted to committing the murder. He also emphasizes that the police have no solid evidence against him. Clyde claims that the place where Darby was found was a hangout for drug addicts and criminals. Nick insists they know he did. But Clyde smirks and says knowing isn't enough. You have to prove it. Clyde offers to confess, but he wants a deal. He demands a comfortable bed in his cell. Nick refuses and walks out. His boss, Jonas, scolds him for not making the deal. Since they had no evidence, they had no choice but to meet Clyde's demand. Nick believes Clyde is playing games with them. Jonas, however, insists they follow through with the deal. Soon, we see Clyde getting the mattress he asked for. In court, Nick argues that Clyde's bail should be denied. Clyde, defending himself, claims he is a law-abiding citizen, and that there's no evidence against him. The judge agrees with Clyde. Nick reminds the court that Clyde had agreed to confess but didn't follow through. Suddenly, Clyde starts clapping sarcastically, mocking the judge and the entire justice system. He calls out the judge for her poor judgment and insults her. Everyone is stunned. In the end, the judge revokes Clyde's bail. As promised, Clyde confesses to Darby's murder. He then says he has another confession but wants another deal in return. Clyde demands a 20-ounce steak with sides for lunch, and he wants to listen to music while eating. In exchange, he will give them crucial information about Bill Reynolds, Darby's lawyer. Nick learns that Bill has been missing for 3 days. Clyde, speaking on camera, warns that if they want Bill to stay alive, they must serve his lunch exactly at 1 p.m. the next day. They prepare his steak exactly as he requested. But 5 minutes before 1, supervisor decides to double-check everything, causing a delay of 8 minutes. When Clyde finally gets his meal, he stays calm and tells them where to find Bill, urging them to hurry. Nick rushes into a helicopter and they fly toward the location. While Clyde listens to music, his cellmate threatens to kill him if he doesn't share his food. Instead of fighting, Clyde and his cellmate enjoy the meal together. Then, out of nowhere, Clyde brutally stabs his cellmate to death using the T-bone steak's sharp bone. Meanwhile, Nick finds Bill with an oxygen mask on, but it's too late. Bill is already dead. If Clyde had received his lunch on time, Bill would have survived. Nick gets a call informing him that Clyde murdered his cellmate. As a result, Clyde is moved to solitary confinement. Nick visits him and demands to know what all the killing is achieving for him. Clyde says he wants people to learn that they must take responsibility for their actions. Nick argues, is killing people in your family's name really bringing them peace? Clyde coldly replies, they're dead. They don't feel anything. Nick and Jonas then meet with a government official who has intel on Clyde. The man reveals that Clyde is a tactical mastermind who can kill people without even being in the same room as them. He warns that everything Clyde is doing is part of his plan, even being in solitary confinement. He advises Nick, if you want to stop him, go to his cell and kill him. That's your only option. Clyde's ultimate goal is to eliminate everyone involved in his family's murder case. Nick and Jonas go to the judge, asking her to override Clyde's civil rights. She agrees and signs the order. Just then, her phone rings. The moment she answers, the phone explodes, killing her instantly. Furious, Nick storms into Clyde's cell and demands, "Who's helping you?" Clyde smirks and gives Nick an ultimatum. Release me by 6 a.m. or everyone dies. Guards escort him back to solitary confinement. Nick and Sarah work through files searching for clues. The entire day office stays up until 6 a.m. trying to figure out Clyde's plan. Eventually, Nick tells everyone to go home, get some rest, and return later. Sarah gets into her car, starts the engine boom. Explosions go off as multiple cars burst into flames, killing Sarah and several others. Clyde is still in prison. Nick is now certain someone on the outside is helping him. 6 officers are confirmed dead. Nick and Jonas meet with the mayor. The mayor is shocked that a man in prison could kill so many people. Nick sends his family to a safe location. When he returns home, he notices that someone has been inside by looking at the framed newspaper. Clyde is brought in front of Nick and the detective. Nick, furious, beats Clyde. The detective pulls out his gun, ready to kill him, but Nick stops him. Clyde calmly says that his work isn't finished yet. On the way back from Sarah's funeral, we see a man dressed in black controlling a military drone equipped with a machine gun, an EMP, and a missile launcher. He opens fire on Jonas' car, riddling it with bullets before blowing it up. The mayor scolds Nick. Nick is ready to resign, but instead, the mayor appoints him as the new district attorney and orders him to end the situation as soon as possible. The mayor of Philadelphia declares a state of emergency. No one is allowed to move freely in the city. Nick receives an email regarding Clyde's properties. As he reviews the documents, he notices a small garage near the prison that is registered under Clyde's name. Nick and the detective go there and discover a tunnel Clyde had dug, leading directly beneath the prison. Clyde had built tunnels to every solitary confinement cell. That's why he killed his cellmate to get transferred to solitary. The detective checks Clyde's cell and realizes he's not there. Dressed in disguise, Clyde slips past security forces and enters City Hall. Nick and the detective realize that Clyde has been watching every security camera, even inside Nick's house. Clyde plants a bomb to kill the mayor, who is in an important security meeting. Nick and the detective move in secretly, making sure Clyde doesn't notice them. They find a cart placed under the conference room and a suitcase that turns out to be a bomb. Inside the suitcase, there's a phone. If it rings, the bomb's countdown will begin. Clyde returns to his tunnel and watches the meeting start on his monitor. Then he picks up a phone and heads to his cell. As he enters, he sees Nick inside holding a gun. Nick tells him he wants to do the right thing. Clyde tries to negotiate one last deal. Nick tells him he finally understands Clyde has been waiting all this time for Nick to say, "I don't make deals with killers." Nick asks Clyde not to detonate the bomb and tries to reason with him. Clyde simply says, "I'm sorry," and dials the number. Nick rushes out of the cell. The detective locks the tunnel entrance, and Clyde realizes the bomb is under his bed. Clyde takes one last look at his daughter's bracelet. Then, the cell erupts in flames as the bomb goes off, engulfing him in the explosion.